So it's day 2 here in Germany, Eurobike 2019, and we're going to do something a little different today. We're going over to Hall A2, where a handful of European companies are showing off a load of exotic products. Let's go over there and have a look. Chris, I'm stuck. Shit. Oh, there we go. All right, we're free now. It took me a few tries. Let me just get out of my little car here. Close this. All right, let's go have a look. So our first stop in Hall A2 is to look at the Intend Hover Shock. Now this thing is pretty special. It's made in very small numbers in Germany, and it costs 1,000 euros. But it offers some pretty neat features. It's air sprung, but the whole goal here is a coil-like feel, coil-like resistance to heat, and a coil-like sensitivity. And they're doing that by a couple different things. First, a very large negative air spring chamber that's adjustable via this small dial right here. So if you put this on a bike and you adjust it so the negative spring pressure is a little bit lower, it feels a little firmer off the top, but if you make that pressure quite a bit higher, you can actually feel a huge difference in how sensitive the shock is. And that is done with this valve right here. You're opening a port and you're letting the air go into the negative spring, and then you close it. Now, when we talk about heat, we have to talk about damping oil. What they've done at Intend is they've separated the damping oil from the air spring. Now, obviously, Fox, RockShox, and all those other guys, they do the same thing, but if you look at an air sprung shock, you have your air spring, and the damper actually sits in the middle of that air spring. Well, what happens to your air spring over a long descent? It gets hot. So what they've done is separated the oil from the air spring, and they do that by keeping the oil in here, and it moves from here into here, and the air spring is right here. Because the oil isn't surrounded by the air spring, it's in here and up in here, it will stay cooler. Because this wall right here is exposed to the atmosphere. There's only one wall in between the damping oil and the atmosphere. So let's go back to the air spring for a minute, and especially that very large negative air spring chamber that the shock uses. Now the goal here again is coil-like sensitivity and also a coil-like spring rate, which is essentially linear compared to an air spring. Now they're doing that with a massive air chamber, and like I said, that very large negative air chamber that helps the shock go into its travel. Also, let's flip it over right here. You see this little cap? That comes out, and you can adjust the volume of the air chamber with thick O-rings that go on the end of this. All right, so now we're gonna open it up, we're gonna have a look. So if we undo this, this has obviously already been loosened for me. So, and if we look underneath here, you could see that concave right there. And the whole idea there is the largest negative air spring possible. And if we undo this end, this is where your damping is adjusted. This is your low speed rebound and your low speed compression. Let's undo this. Now, there's no piston or shims on this right now, but that would all be in here. And if we do this, you can see the oil travels from here through this bridge, through these holes here, and then picture a piston with a bunch of shims on it, and it would come out here, and there's your adjusters. Now the shock, being air sprung, is obviously fairly light. A 210 millimeter length is said to weigh 410 grams. It's not inexpensive though, as you'd expect. It's made in fairly small numbers. It's gonna be right around 1,000 euros when it becomes available in a few months' time. There you go. That's Intend's Hover Shock. Pretty neat stuff. All right, next up, tire inserts. And I think I'm gonna have to stop making pool noodle jokes because these things are getting interesting. So these are new from Huck Norris, and they're called the MegaNorris inserts. There's 3 different versions, and you can see they look quite different. The first one is simpler. It's one compound of closed cell foam. No, your sealant won't get absorbed by the insert. It's a new shape that's supposed to be easier to install, and these cutouts save weight. And it's basically, it does the same thing as the previous Huck Norris, just a very refined shape. This one they're calling Toast, and if you feel it, it feels kind of like toast when you squeeze it. The next one though, it's called the sandwich, and it's more like an open face sandwich. On the top, you have the same gray colored closed cell foam, but if we flip it over on the bottom, there's a much stiffer, much harder foam. Now the idea there is, it goes up against your rim and it protects your rim against impacts, sharp edges, rocks, things like that. The next one, this one's called the hamburger. Probably doesn't taste as good as a hamburger. Now this one uses the hard foam on the top, hard foam on the bottom for extra protection, and inside it has the standard slightly softer foam. So if we do that, you can see how that works, just like so. So they're still cut to fit as well, so one size will do both 27.5 and 29-inch wheels. Weight, you're looking at 130 grams for the TOS, the single compound version that's intended for trail bike use. The Enduro one, the sandwich, you're looking at 200 grams. And for this one, the DH insert, called the hamburger, 250 grams. The next place we find ourselves is in the Nikolaj booth with their all-new Saturn 14. Now this is their trail bike, you might want to call it. If you run it with 29-inch wheels, it has 130 millimeters of travel, and if you run it with 27.5-inch wheels, you can get up to 140 millimeters of travel from this rear end here. Now front end geometry, 65.5-degree head angle, and a relatively low bottom bracket height, but all of this stuff can be changed via headset cup and these clever things right here called mutators. Now you may have seen these before on the G1, they were down here, but they put them up here for the Saturn. Now this allows you to adjust all sorts of angles, and if you take in the different wheel size, if you want to run a mullet version, different options here, different setups up here. They're saying there are hundreds of different combinations you can come up with. Now there's one interesting thing to look at here, which is this strut that connects the bottom shock mount up to just below the rocker's main pivot here. Now the idea, Nikolaj says, is to take in forces when the shock bottoms out hard and dissipate them so they're not being fed right into this area here. Now they're saying actually that this is a lighter solution than just beefing up this area, which is interesting. Frames, 2,500 euro without a shock, and they'll even do custom geometry if you want. It's only money. So we're back from the halls of Eurobike. It's 3 a.m. and I'm eating Haribo to stay awake while I type. But I want you guys to tell me what you think was most interesting. That crazy Intend hover shock, Nikolaj Saturn 14 trail bike, or Huck Norris's new tire inserts. Let us know in the comments below which one makes the most sense.